Well,
More coffee.
Fresh Express coming at you.
Fresh Express. Welcome back to the podcast. What matters most?
Going strong.
Going strong. Dutch Brothers is good. Not just good for you, but good for you.
Just good for the soul
Mm-hmm.
on a deeper level.
On a deeper level. So I am Josh, and this is still Danny.
Still Danny.
And today we want to talk to you about expectations. We've talked about it a little bit at our high school group, but I wanted to dive in just a little bit deeper with when things don't go as we expected. How do we respond? How do we react? How do we move with that? And so looking at a couple of really prime examples.
I can think of a couple. Kind of happened kind of recently. You know?
Uh-huh. Of just things that were like, whoa, I was not expecting that.
Wait, what's going on?
Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, our reaction or our response to that either is really helpful in building and growing our character, or it can be really detrimental and painful. And so when things don't go as expected and it's a bad thing, I think most people kind of have some built-in grace and mercy for that situation where they're like, okay, I get it. You know, their mom just died, or I get it. Nobody was expecting that. I get it. There's some trauma associated with that. But in those moments, in those first few moments, we have a decision to make of, are we going to lean into God, or are we going to lean away from God and isolate and not talk to people, not pray, not, all these things. And it can be very, very dangerous when things don't go as expected, based off of what we do in the aftermath.
Right.
And so, yeah, we want to kind of riff on that a little bit with just some things that we can do differently, and some things that we can do in those moments that will help us be better on the other side of whatever it is that happened. So, Joseph is a really popular one, probably one of my favorite examples of things not going as you expected. Mm-hmm. Joseph had some crazy dreams early on that really set his expectation level on such a spot that he thought he was going to be like the bee's knees, the big guy. His family's going to bow down to him. Everybody, stars and moon, and just all this crazy stuff. Pretty outlandish. And he ends up getting thrown in a well and sold into slavery. So not quite what he was expecting.
To be fair, it does come around.
It does come around, but not very quickly.
Yeah.
Because he then goes to Egypt as a slave, gets falsely accused, like literally falsely accused, and gets thrown in jail. Helps some guys out in jail, interprets dreams. They totally forget about him.
Which, can you imagine that? You're like, okay, you get sold to Egypt. You're like sick. Okay, This is perfect. Now you're like, you're doing okay. You're, Potiphar's servant, and he's liking you. You're doing a good job. And then you just get absolutely just slapped, basically, because guess what? You got falsely accused of essentially raping his wife. Now you're in jail. At this point, I would just be like, I'm done with these people. Like, I'm just going to stay here. I'm just going to shut up, and I don't want anything else to happen. But just the fact that he still continues to help people. And then he gets forgotten by the one dude after he's like, I'll get you out of here. He doesn't, right? He's still there. I would just be like, no, this is it. I'm done. Just forget it.
Yep.
Help the king, not.
You're like, I don't know. If I help the king, what's going to happen?
Exactly.
Is he
just
going to...
based on the pattern here.
Yeah. But all throughout those things that, came at him that he didn't expect, both the really, really good and the really, really bad, he didn't get bitter. He didn't get resentful towards God. He didn't lash out. He definitely messed with his brothers, for sure. Which I think we can all look at and be like, come on, like that was light compared to what he could have done.
Worse.
But he, the certain things that he knew, like he knew he could really, really mess with them and freak him out if he messed with Benjamin. And so, but anyways, I'm not necessarily advocating that, when something unexpected happens, we just totally punk somebody or whatever. But it in those moments, it does expose what matters most. And for Joseph, what mattered most was his family. What mattered most was uniting them. What mattered most was actually taking care of people, even when they weren't taking care of him, which is huge. It speaks volumes to his character, and I think that that's definitely one of the most heroic, like encouraging stories when we look at that. Of man, that is, I want to be like Joseph in that area. When the craziness of life just knocks you sideways and you're like, I do not understand why this is happening or what's going on. Mm-hmm. We can look to the story of Joseph and how he endured and the things that he went through, and get a better grasp on how we can respond to those situations.
Right, like that level of just continuous forgiveness, despite, like you said, everything that's being thrown at him.
Yeah.
You imagine having that much, just the ability to not be bitter at. Like, he had every right, kind of like I think you were alluding to. He could have done a lot worse.
Oh, yeah.
His brothers.
He could have killed his brothers.
Yeah. And you know what? Everyone reading or whatever, they would have probably been like, kind of had it coming. You know, serves them right, basically. And regardless, like, obviously sounds like he was kind of a little bit of a punk kid, just a little bit. But still, like, what was done to him was, no one would say justified. No one would say is right. And so he, though, chose to, I mean, I loved them despite that, which is crazy to think about. And just the fact that, you know, we've talked about when forgiveness, like, forgive but don't forget. Like, obviously, I wouldn't say he forgot in a sense, but the fact that he was willing to, it wasn't like he forgave them. He's like, okay, I forgive you. I don't really want to see you. Like, he wanted to bless them. He wanted to bring them into the land that he was now, you know, second of command of. Like, he wanted them to have the best place, the best ground. Like, I think it says, right, they got literally like the choicest land. And so to me, that's just crazy that after all of that, after his expectations being completely skewed aside, completely messed up, and wrongfully so in a sense, the fact that he was able to do that is like, we don't have much excuse.
Yeah. And that is where I think it's good to look at people that have had to endure more or had to go through more, because just like with with running, you want to run with somebody that's better than you. Otherwise, you're not going to get better.
Better than you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Hashtag Ben is good to run with. That and my friend David. But you want to look at people and characters like Joseph, because chances are none of us have gone through as extreme of circumstances as Joseph. So we got to already put ourselves in that mindset of like, okay, probably not going to get thrown in a well by my family, left for dead, and then sold into slavery.
Really?
You know, some of us might get falsely accused of something. Some of us might get forgotten. Some of us might have an opportunity to take revenge and choose not to. Those are probably more likely. But all of that is on the canvas of life for Joseph. All of those experiences, all of those encounters definitely had an influence and an impact, and he still didn't get bitter. So for us looking at that, I think it's a good template or a model to be like, okay, when things don't go as expected, how can I respond? How can I react to that? And if I choose to go the way of Joseph, that's going to be really powerful. That's going to really be, it's going to be better for me. It's going to be better for the situation. It's going to be better for the people involved. And there's going to be a redemptive potential for it, versus if I just blast everybody and just, lose it. You can expect a lot more chaos and fallout as a result.
I was just thinking another kind of example of expectation. I was just reading through Job, and you look at that, like, that guy had everything, right? And that was kind of, I think, I don't want to say he expected that, but like that was his life. And then that all, in seemingly an instant, was taken away, flipped on its head. And despite all of that, what did he do? He never once denounced God. He never once cursed God. And then, of course, he was, again, blessed for that. But just that, I think, for me, that's another example of someone that, in an instant, lost everything.
Yeah.
And again, for no particular reason. It's not like he did something super bad and then he's like, oh, well, I guess this is what I get.
Yeah.
And the fact that he was so like humble and so just basically, living with his hand open, literally, to where he took it and he was like, well, God gives and he takes away.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
I'm still going to praise God. Doesn't matter what I have. Like, to me, I read that story. Every time I read it, I'm like I don't know. It affects me in such a way that, because I know, especially in America, we live with such a closed fist mentality. I work for this. This is mine.
Yeah.
This is.
I deserve this. I earn this.
And obviously, I'm not like, I love America and I love freedom and I love, like, 100,000%. But just that idea of no, still, who gave that to you? Ultimately, it was God. So, I'll die for my freedom, right? But I'm saying living with the mentality that, hey, everything I have is God's. Like, we look at Job. How can we not?
Yeah.
Why we saw and we see this thing. It's such a nice glimpse into God. Sees that. Like he sees that and he knows your heart, and so he's going to bless that. It might not be instantly, but he will bless that.
Yeah. And it might not be in the way that we expect.
Sure.
It might be better.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of things too, where we have to have that trust built in there too. And we've talked about that, where you got to trust God with some of the stuff that doesn't make sense. You got to trust God with some of these situations that are just really complex and dynamic in a lot of ways of, boy, this is going to affect this and this is going to affect this. And we got to leave him with the results. And I think that's kind of where when we put the expectation then on God, say, okay, God, I don't know what to do. I'm expecting you to help me with this. I'm expecting you to, give me some sort of, strength, endurance, perseverance, hope, whatever. And then when we look and we find that in the Bible, that's where it's like, oh, okay.
And with
it
that,
shifts everything.
I mean, obviously, there's the fine line between like you've talked about, kind of the brat mentality of God. I expect this, so you better do it. Like, you're not forcing God's hand, okay? You can't. You're not going to force God's hand. That's not how that works. And so that's, I guess, I just want to throw in there. That's the heart part of it. Like, your heart has to be in line with that.
Yeah. Yeah, because otherwise, exactly, you can end up with the brat theology that says, well, I didn't do all this, so I lived a righteous life. I didn't cuss, didn't swear.
So
I expect.
Yes.
Like,
you better
whoa,
deliver, God.
No, that's not how God works. That's not how the world works.
Yeah.
That's not how the fallen world works. Yeah, it's like, man, sometimes bad things happen to really, really good people unexpectedly. And sometimes really, really good things happen to really, really bad people. Right? But when we believe and when we trust that God is just and that he sees all of it, we'll leave the results and everything else with him. We're not going to be, him and Han or what, but they do, it's like, yeah. You're right. Yeah. The other powerful story of that is with Jesus and his disciples, and they all they met him in different circumstances and different situations, but they definitely had expectations of Jesus that Jesus straight up didn't meet. And he challenged them, and I think in a lot of ways intentionally broke those expectations, because I mean, even with his own mom, one of his first miracles, she's like, hey, Jesus, there's a problem here, and he's like, Mom, it's not my time yet.
It's really not.
And so she's just like, well, just leaves him, like, peace out, like, do whatever he says, guys. Like, wow, thanks, Mom. And it ends up having this amazing, miraculous turn water into wine miracle at a wedding. His disciples were the people that started following him and stuff. They were like, Jesus, I really feel like you should, maybe tone down your message, because it seems like you hate the Pharisees and Sadducees. Like, you're really going after their dirty laundry. And then you're the dirty laundry, like the tax collectors and the prostitutes, like, you're talking to them and associating with them and, like, eating with them. And that's kind of like, I don't know. I know you're like 30 something now, but we just don't do that. And you're doing that, and it's bothering people. And, like, we're not expecting a rabbi or somebody of your, clearly learned spirituality to be associating with these people. And Jesus was was breaking that consistently, for a reason, for a purpose, to show like, hey, you know what? This is what you guys were expecting. This is what I expect from you. Mm-hmm. As the Lord and Savior of the entire world, this is what I expect. These are the things that I'm going after, and I'm not going to do anything that my Father hasn't told me, explicitly, like do this. And it's powerful movements. It's powerful things that he was saying to people, changing their lives, literally and physically touching them and healing them of things, and changing their life, unexpectedly, in the most beautiful possible way. That he kind of interrupted their dysfunction, interrupted their moments of sin, of deceit, of lies, of all this stuff, and was like, hey, I'm here. Go and sin no more. Hey, I'm here. I forgive you. Hey, I'm here. I love you. Hey, I'm here. What do you want? Asking a blind man what he wants. He's not quite what you'd expect. Yeah. You're like, really? What do you mean, what do I want? Like, you kind of want to see. And so, going through and forgiving their sins, forgiving all this stuff, it's like, whoa, breaking that expectation or that mold that people were putting on him, thinking, well, you got to be this conquering king and kick out the Romans, and they were limiting it to that. He expanded those expectations, and it's like, hey, I'm not just going to displace Rome. Like, my kingdom is bigger than that. Yeah. The people that I'm going after are more than that. Like, I'm not limiting it anymore. My love is just, So, and how do we handle that? Mm-hmm. How do we respond to that? Where when Jesus starts breaking our expectations and says, hey, actually, I want you to forgive him. What? No. You're like, hey, I actually want you to submit to this, or to lay down here, lay down this, and rest in my justice, rest in my peace, rest in what I'm going to do through this situation. Don't take it upon yourself to try to do this or do that. That can really rattle us, because we're like, ooh, but I wanted to go, do this or say this or post this or whatever. And, and especially in a season where the unexpected happens on a daily basis. There's things that, man, this last year, 2020, had you told me in 2019, like, hey, Josh, by the way, this is going to happen and this is happening. What do you think? What do you think the chances are that this would happen? I'd be like, no, that's not. There's no way. There's no way. Yeah, there's a way. Yeah, way. Like, yikes. So, I think part of the biggest part for me with the expectations, and we can talk about this a little bit more, maybe in the next episode or something, but with, it's something that we've been going through as a church. Our pastor Scott has been talking about holy distance, and one of the key factors of that, when you create that holy distance, is when you take a person off of your hook, what they owe you, what you're expecting from them, and you put them on God's hook. There's forgiveness that happens there. There's freedom that happens there. And when you unhook them from, you owe me, or I was expecting this from you and you didn't come through, or whatever, and you put that expectation then on God, he can then work crazy, awesome miracles through some of this stuff that you never thought possible, stuff that you never thought or could have expected. He then begins to work on that, and you don't have to carry around the burden of unforgiveness and bitterness and all that other kind of stuff. So shifting that expectation onto God for the situation is another really key thing to what matters most in that situation, is that we don't hold on to that unforgiveness. We don't hold on to that bitterness, or we don't hold on to that, man, I was really expecting this and I was so let down and so embarrassed, or so frustrated. We unhook that situation or that person, and we put them on God's hook and say, hey, you know what? I've forgiven them, God. Now you deal with them. Like you bless them, do whatever your will is in their
but
life.
You're okay with that. That's the thing, is you're to the point where that's okay. Whether if he busts with them, hey,
yeah, yep,
great. If he chooses to deliver justice now, well, okay. But you can't be like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yep.
It's you have to have the right heart attitude for that as well.
And that can be really hard to do when our expectations haven't been met, or when something that we thought was going to happen doesn't. And even if it's not a literal person, when we take them off of that, when we take the situation off the hook there, man, I was really expecting to be able to go back to school, or I was really expecting to get this job, or I was really expecting, and when we take that like frustration or that disappointment, we say, okay, I'm not going to just dwell on this and focus on this and be so zoomed in on it that I forget all these other things. I'm going to take that off that hook and put it on God's hook and be like, okay, God, I'm expecting you now to help me out here. Give me perspective, give me humility, give me peace, give me, these things that help really flatten out the situation to where you can see it for what it actually is. You can see the person for who they actually are, whether that's good or bad.
Yeah.
But you can understand more fully, and you're not so wrapped up in the emotion of, this is a surprise to me. This isn't something that I woke up this morning thinking was going to happen. And it's powerful. And so if we can really choose to live like that, you really see the shift in the disciples, much like we saw, with the story of Joseph and even with Job. When you have that encounter with God, when we have that encounter with Jesus, when we have that power of the Holy Spirit in us, we can do things differently. The disciples lived very, very differently after Jesus rose from the dead, walked among them, and then went back up to heaven and left a very clear, this is my expectation of you guys now. They lived in that. They thrived in that. They changed the world in that. But their expectation shifted from a more me-focused thing to God be the glory, and there's nothing that can take that away from me. And so when we can elevate that expectation to that level, it's no longer, circumstances no longer get to jar us or shift our emotions or mess with us to that level. Like it's still perfectly normal and perfectly human to be disappointed if something doesn't go your way or go like you expected. You're not wrong. It's not a sin to be like, man, that really bums me out. But when if we start questioning God's goodness in that, if we start, isolating, if we start like, oh no, I'm not gonna
dictating how you live.
Yes, that's where it can become a problem, and that's where, lost expectations or disappointment or anything like that can be very, very dangerous if we go that way. And we can end up being in a situation very similar to Judas, because Judas had expectations of Jesus that weren't met, and he responded to those very differently than all the other disciples. He thought and was frustrated that Jesus didn't go and kick Roman butt and be this like vindictive, king of, righting all these wrongs. And so he then took it upon himself to kind of like, well, man, if you're not going to do it, you're not who I thought you were. So, but then he ended up realizing in the end, like, oh no, what have I done? What have I done? And we can put ourselves in a really, really big mess when we start questioning God when things don't go like we expected. So the challenge to us, and if you've got any closing remarks, you can say anything, but just when we expect the unexpected with God, like just kind of trust, like, hey, God's going to work something out. I don't know exactly what it is, but I trust in his goodness. I trust that he cares for me, and I trust that whether it's super, super fun or super, super difficult, if he's in it, he's going to work something good out of it. And I don't have to be scared of that. That I want you guys to hear that in this season that we're in, that in any season that we're in, that as long as we are going with God and abiding in him and following after him, we can expect beneficial things to come out of that, to come out of the pain, to come out of the sorrow, to come out of the joy, to come out of the blessing, like all of those things. if his hand is on it, if his hand is directing it, if his hand is equipping us and empowering us to get through it, it will be good. It's not always going to be easy, but it will be good. And we can expect that. So
I like it.
Cool. All right. Well, we love you guys. I expect that each of you will contribute to your local businesses and, go buy things, especially Dutch Brothers. No.
Because they're just hard for business.
Yeah, it's just the lines and all that kind of stuff.
Not like you were late because of it or anything.
Yeah. What do you have you ever worked retail where you expect a tip? No.
Usually I expect I can't say no.
Okay.
Because it's not great.
A totally different expectation.
Yeah,
right.
I expect basically like a verbal slap in the face.
This isn't my size.
Yeah, because they expected this. I'm like, listen, it's not my fault. But I expected
I expected a receipt that's legible.
I'm like, I blame the printer. It's like, I expected you to know the password to my account so I can check this. I'm like, well, sorry. You had false expectations. I don't know what to tell you. And they're like, well, you're stupid. Basically.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah.
So I can expect to need patience. Patience.
Hashtag patience. Yeah. There we go.
We've talked about patience.
We have. I think so.
Yeah, we have.
Rewind. You guys can go and check out the rewind.
We have.
We have.
Did we say that's what matters most?
I think that is what matters most. Yeah.
Well, that is.
I did.
So. Okay, good.
I feel like I said it.
Okay.
Okay.
Otherwise, but we said it then.
It's a wrap, y'all.